In last few videos, we discussed so many important topics, design concept, architecture patterns, problem solving techniques, so many things. But out of all those things, this would be the most important video for you. You know why? Because doesn't matter how good your system is, if you can't take that into production, then it doesn't work, right? It's no use. So most of the time, 50% of the time, things work on your local machine, doesn't work when you push into the dev or a UAT or a QA environment. Main reason is most of the time you are not the person who's deploying this, right? Maybe you have infra team, maybe you have a DevOps team, maybe you have separate deployment team, and they are deploying it. They have no idea what you have done. You have no idea what they are doing. So as a result, they say, hey, this is not working, and they send some logs for you, and then you can't reproduce it because you're saying it's work on the local. It's real mess, right? So today, I'm going to teach you the basic foundation where you can learn the debugging or else troubleshooting these type of issues. Because troubleshooting is an art. It's something you can learn it's not something I can teach you. But what I can do is, I can lay out the foundation, I can teach you the necessary things and the concept you must understand. Then rest of the things you need to practice, you need to do it, and you need to learn it, right? So the first and the most important thing you need to get into this like good troubleshooter or someone who has hands on to troubleshoot, how someone who can identify and solve the problem is really fast. If you want to be that person, what you need to do is you need to understand the basics, very basics, fundamentals you need to understand. For example, how the connectivity works. When you connect from your client to server, where this connectivity goes, what is the role of the firewall, what does subnet mean, what does DNS mean. Those things are so important because those are the key things you need to know to be a good, someone who's really good on troubleshooting, right? So today, in this video, we are going to discuss the basic foundation where we can start step by step how we can progress. So stay focused because this will be one of really important video for you, because even though you're a really good software engineer, if you can troubleshoot, if you can help to deploy your system to production, then you're not a really good engineer. Okay, let's try to understand with an example. So usually we develop our systems on local machine, and then we push this to something like a Git or somewhere, some sort of source control. And then you have dev servers, right? Maybe you have a QA service, or maybe you have a UAT service, and so on and so forth, right? Multiple staging servers, and also you have a production, okay? So I'm not going to explain the deployment part here, okay? What I'm going to explain is, let's say you build it and those services work fine on your local machine, and now you hand over this to DevOps team or some sort of deployment team to deploy that, and then they say, hey, this is not working. So now you need to go there and you can help them to troubleshoot where the problem is, right? So let's try to understand. So this is out of our picture, right? So now let's make it more clear. So here your local machine, and let's say you have a web server, and let's say you have app server, okay? So let's say something like you are working with something where you have something like a WebLogic or a Glassfish or something, some sort of app server. Maybe you have a proxy or some sort of web server where they can proxy the HTTP content, and then you have a client's machines and everything, right? So now, how this works is, usually those are inside the intranet, okay? Usually these things are inside the intranet, which means we don't have a publicly resolved DNS, okay? Most of the time, right? Sometimes you may have, sometimes you may don't have. So now they're saying, okay, hey, we deploy this and it's not working. How they're saying it's not working? Because when you give the build to deploy, you're giving some sort of a curl command or some sort of a REST test suite or something, so they can verify the build. They're saying hey, it doesn't work. Now first question you should ask, okay, from where you did execute the command. Let's say it's a curl command. You need to ask, hey, from where you did execute the command. So now this is something most of software engineers don't understand, because it's not that they don't understand, they're a little confused. Okay, here's the thing. So we usually, if this is a local, right, we usually use a tool like a putty. Some people call it a putty. I don't know, I call it putty, right? So we use something called putty. If you are using on a Windows environment, if you're using in a Linux or a Mac environment, you don't need the putty, but let's assume you are a Windows. Okay? So now you run the putty here and you connecting using maybe SSH to the server. Okay? So now technically you type commands in your machine. Okay? Technically you are typing a command on your machine. So when someone asks, from where did you execute the command? I executed my local. Okay. Where? I use a putty. Okay. Putty, you connected to where? I connected to web server and execute the command. Tell me again, where did you execute the command? I executed local. No, you're wrong. You didn't execute the command on your local. Right? That is the misunderstanding. So what the putty does is, especially if you are using SSH, in the SSH, right, this SH part means shell. Okay, this SH part means shell. S means secure shell. Okay, so you connecting through SSH mean virtually you bringing this server shell into your machine. It doesn't come to your machine technically, right? I mean, you transport the command, text command, but your command, though you type using your machine keyboard on your laptop or your desktop, the command actually getting executed here. Okay, it is not getting executed here. So if you execute any command using your putty, that command is executing wherever you connected, not your local. Okay, I explain this because I have experienced so many times troubleshooting team going through a problem because they are saying command executed on the local, but actually they execute on here. What they mean by the local, because they type the command technically using their local keyboard. Okay, right. So now let's say now we understand that part, right? So if someone asks where you execute the command, now we know how to explain that. So now let's go to the real problem. So now what they're saying is, we can't connect to your service. So your service doesn't work. Okay. So now what you need to do is, now let's say you are starting debugging. Okay. For example, let's assume you are debugging, you are checking the connectivity from here to your server. You need to understand this. Most of the time, depend on your infrastructure, of course, your local machine do not have direct connection to QA or UAT environments. Okay, you may have a connectivity to dev environment, but you may not have a connectivity to QA or the UAT environment. So first you need to make sure from your network team or infrastructure team, do I have a connection from my local to QA environment? Okay, so let's assume in this case you have. So now what you can do is, let's say you want to check with the, here's how it works. If you want to check with the connectivity from here to here, you execute the commands on this machine. If you try to connect it from here to here, you execute the command on this machine. So first thing, okay, this is again so important because people have so misunderstanding about the ping command. So let's say this server, right? Let's say this server URL is QA hyphen code labs hyphen intranet. Okay, this is the this server name, right? QA slash code labs hyphen intranet. Okay, so now this one is QA web hyphen code labs hyphen intranet. Okay, so now you want to see whether we can connect to this server, because the network team saying or deployment team saying your connectivity failed. So first what you can do is, you can issue a command ping QA-code labs internet. Okay. So now, if this ping is working properly, that means you have a connectivity. That means you have a physical, you have a network connectivity from here to there. Okay, that we can clear out. But the opposite side of that doesn't work, because ping use ICMP protocol. Okay, so maybe your firewalls or maybe your destination server block the ICMP protocol. In that case, ping doesn't work, right? So if the ping working, that means you have a connectivity to the server. But if the ping doesn't work, that doesn't tell you don't have a connectivity to the server. That we need to clear. So let's say now, okay, ping, it doesn't work. Okay, ping didn't work. Now we need to check, okay, fine. Now we need to see which port this server is listening. Okay, so let's say this is HTTP traffic, let's say HTTP traffic, so this is using the port 80. If you are not specifying a specific port, HTTP default port is a port 80, HTTPS default port is a 443, unless otherwise you specify the port. So now what you can do is, right, now ping is failed, so therefore what you can do is, you can telnet. Okay, you are going to telnet to the same server, QA/codelab/internet port 80. Okay, port 80. So this means we are trying to connect to this server on the port 80, right? So with this command we are checking whether this server, destination server, has someone listening on the port 80. Okay, it can be a web server, it can be anyone, but technically web server is on port 80. So what we check is this one. So this give us if this work, it tells us two things. One, we have a network connectivity. Two, we have someone listening on the port 80. So that means your service is running. Okay. If this is working, most of the time problem in your service configuration or something, because you don't have infrastructure issue. Okay. So let's say for some reason this also doesn't work. Okay. Telnet also doesn't work. Maybe you are getting something like a host cannot find, no host name cannot resolve, or something like that. So now we need to go to third stage, right? So now we know ping doesn't work, we cannot telnet. Because telnet doesn't tell you, because telnet has two things, right? Whether your connectivity connection or someone is listening. So even though you have a proper network connection, if someone is not listening on the port 80, telnet will fail. So now we go to third stage. So there we have two different commands. You have a dig command, or we can use nslookup. Okay. Now what we are trying to do is this client can resolve this URL, this whatever the domain name they have given. Because since we are not going through the IP address, since we are going through the domain name or host name, someone has to be there to translate this host name into the IP address. Because end of the day, your service cannot communicate through the host names. It has to translate to the IP address and eventually to MAC address, right? So we learned this on the TCP video. Go and watch that. Okay. So now what happens is, what we are trying to do from here, we are giving the dig or nslookup command. You can Google parameters, what you want to query over, etc. Right? And see whether this is resolving. Let's say now it doesn't resolve anything. Dig command doesn't resolve a name record or c name record or anything, or nslookup doesn't give anything. Either one is fine, right? So now clearly you know there's a DNS problem. That means the ball is now on the infrastructure, the network team. Okay. So what does DNS problem mean? This QA Code Labs internet host name cannot resolve in translate into IP address. There can be two reasons for this. Since you are in the intranet, these are not public DNS, you should have internal DNS server somewhere in your network. Okay. So your machine may not resolve DNS from this DNS provider, right? Other reason is maybe you need to set the DNS manually through the host file. Right? So you can have etc host or somewhere depending on your operating system. So through the host file, you may need to point the DNS, right? So once you point the DNS, maybe things start to work smoothly, right? So now, let's say DNS is resolved, okay? So now DNS is resolved, right? So D command give the proper input, right? So the proper output, right? So now that means we know DNS resolved, okay? So now we need to make sure someone is listening because telnet failed but DNS resolved. So now we need to make sure whether traffic is goes to other site or not. So now if you have access to, you can do a port scanning or something and see whether someone is listening in the port server, or you can give this information to your network team. Hey, these things I figured out, right? So DNS resolution is fine, but looks like someone is not listening on the port 80. So now, if someone is not listening on the port 80, now we need to go that path. See how we go? And we start from the top and we solve one problem at a time and we see what are the possible and we take one path and go there, right? So which path, when you coming like this, so now we have three paths to go. So which path is the optimum path? That comes with experience. That I cannot teach you, right? That comes with experience. By nature of the problem, you should be able to guess, okay, this is the path I should take. Okay? Right. So now we need to see whether someone is not, whether service is working properly on the server or not. So there can be multiple reasons. Now let's say something like this. Now they check on the server. They say, hey, service is running, right? So now you are in a dead end. Network connectivity is there. Service is running, but still you can connect. Now what are the possible causes, right? So there can be the service is running, but let's say something like this. If you get a machine, you can have multiple network interfaces, ETH0, ETH1, or loopback, multiple interfaces, right? Depending on your configuration. So service is running, and I'm changing this to server. Services may be listening to this IP address, but DNS may be resolved into this IP address. See, right? So if you want to explain me that, so let's say you have this server, right? Now suddenly client becomes a server, right? So two interfaces, 192.168.1.10, 10.81.91.10, right? Two different IP addresses, right? So now here Tomcat OU, whatever the application server is running, it only binding to this IP address, right? It only binding to this IP address. But when you give the dig command resolve 10.81.91.10. So now you got the problem, right? Why? Yes, service is running, it's fine, network connectivity is there, but we resolve the URL resolve for different IP address. So now system is trying to reach this one, Tomcat doesn't listen to this. Problem solved, right? So that's one reason, okay? So you need to make sure, you need to ask them, okay, fine, service is running, what are the interfaces they are listening, okay? So let's say they are listening, they are saying all interfaces they are listening, okay, cool. Now, can you please check us, how is the machine server firewall? Is it up? Okay, if it is a Windows machine, especially with the Windows server, the firewall is terrible. It's always is giving the problem, right? If it's a Linux, it's easy to turn off or add the rules or something like that. So make sure the question you should ask from them, hey, can you please check the firewall? Here's the important thing. You can do that, but you should be competent enough to ask the right question, right? Because you are the one who exactly know how your system works, right? So you should ask the right question from your DevOps team or your deployment team so they can help you to debug. Because don't ever put the ball on their side, hey, system is working, now it's your ball. No, it's a collective thing, it's a teamwork, right? You should help them, you should ask the right question so they can think and they can figure out and maybe they come up with a solution. Okay? So now, so one way we got the problem. So now we realize, okay, whatever the resolving and the listening namespace IP address is same. So now the problem goes to probably firewall. Firewall doesn't work, right? So one other big mistake sometimes we do, we are trying to check this connectivity from the same server itself. Okay, so that's another big mistake we do. What I mean by that. Okay, so let's say we deploy this our web server or app server, right? So now we deploy the system. Okay, so sometimes what we do the mistake is we connect using the putty or some sort of a session, and we checking from here if this is working, right? Even though this work, there is no guarantee if someone is connecting from the outside will work, right? Don't ever do that mistake. Once you deploy something to the server, come out and do your verification. Don't go inside that and do the verification, because that's useless. Okay, that's useless, right? So we discussed so many possible causes and how you going through a debugging path, or how you going through a troubleshooting path, how you decide which road to take, and how you, like, if that doesn't work, how to come back and go in a different path. I hope you get an idea. If you think some other specific use cases I should address, just comment below or reach me into my Facebook page. I'm so happy to explain and discuss those things with you. And then stay safe, subscribe. The red button, just click that, subscribe, and also click that bell icon. And if you like the video, click the thumbs up, and we'll see you soon in the next video. Happy troubleshooting.